We have a big problem in this country. We haven't grown the economy in virtually 15 years. The problem is American values, traditional American values, and the decline of the culture of family and marriage. And only we can change this.
I was just a young, wonky budget math guy working for Bill Bennett at Empower America. I helped crunch numbers on one of the versions of the leading index of cultural indicators. I salute you, and I know you're creating this index, which is fantastic because we have to communicate to our fellow citizens that this doesn't have to be this way. We have to show what's happening to the economy. We have to show the degradation of our culture, of the breakdown of the family, and so that we can build the kind of outrage we need to help resuscitate and get the American idea back on track. If we give the country a really clear and compelling choice, we can get our nation turned around. And we can't frame this choice if we don't have a good way to spell out the consequences. And so all I would say is, hallelujah, amen, and thank you for doing what you're doing, and just keep it up.
How are families doing in America today? There isn't a way to measure in a coherent, unified way. The reason we've never been able to do this for families is because it's really, really hard. It takes mathematicians to figure out how all the variables are connected. Dr. Wendy Warcholik, Scott Moody, Wendy and Scott, they have an incredible amount of experience in this space. This is not the first index that they've created, and it's both an academic and intellectual experience as well as something that's very personal.
The Family Prosperity Index is a measure that takes a vast array of economic and social data, boils it down to one number for every state, and then ranks those states based on which state is the best environment for families. Up until now, there's never been a measure that brings the economic factors and social factors together to create a complete view of the whole person, of human behavior, a whole holistic view of human behavior and well-being, and its impact on the economy.
What you are seeing unveiled today is absolutely unprecedented. I believe it's a game changer. This is an incredible opportunity for people like me who engage elected officials, who want to see good policy passed, not because I'm a political ideologue, but because I'm a champion for families.
Family Prosperity Index is all based on highly credible government data, and the analysis is drawn from unbiased published sources. So it's comprehensive in scope, so we can get a true understanding of family prosperity within a state.
I've been married to a wonderful woman for almost 18 years. Most of what she does is invisible. GDP only sees her when she goes to the grocery store. GDP does not see her when she teaches my 3 children how to make a good life. It's an exciting time to be looking at a tool that takes the kinds of things that we know matter. And we know that the economics matters, and we know that some of these more social measures also matter too, and we pull them together.
I can't wait to take the data that is being supplied to legislators and to talk to them about what we have seen in this report. To be able to craft policies that help families truly thrive.
So now imagine, as advocacy leaders in your state, a broader and stronger coalition that you can build behind your think tank or your group or whatever kind of organization you represent. What if you could be armed with new and potent information and a whole new angle to change that debate? We can be confident now that in raising critical questions, we have the moral high ground, something we've always lacked. They always claim the moral high ground. We claim the numerical high ground. Now we can have both.
Strong families have a very strong economic impact. It's good for our economy. It's good for our country. And of course, the opposite is true too. Good policies that result in a strong economy, it's good for families.
We all know that our economy isn't what it used to be. But how do we know for sure just how well or how poorly it's doing? We follow the jobs report and the stock market, but how accurate and complete are these as measures of prosperity? At the same time, we know American families are not flourishing like they once were. But do we know why? And is there a connection between the state of our economy and the state of our families? For the first time since Dr. Bill Bennett's landmark research on the leading cultural indicators in the 1990s, we now have a way to use government data to score the economic and social well-being of families from year to year and from state to state. The Family Prosperity Index. As the Dow Jones Industrial Average measures the rise and fall of the stock market, the Family Prosperity Index measures the strength and prosperity of families and the nation by combining the most important social and economic data into a single number. We can now measure U.S. progress every year and rate states against each other by how well they are providing an environment for families to prosper and flourish. President Ronald Reagan once said, "For us, faith, work, family, neighborhood, freedom, and peace are not just words, they're expressions of what America means. Families stand at the center of our society." Information is power. By providing a more complete picture of what prosperity looks like, the Family Prosperity Index gives us all a more powerful voice for positive change and a roadmap for finding real solutions that will make a difference for families and thus for our nation. Find out how your state ranks at familyprosperity.org.
All right, folks, we're going to get started. I'm going to ask you if you'd please make your way toward the seats to this part of the auditorium. We do want to thank Crosspoint Church for making this beautiful facility available for this evening. So thanks to Crosspoint Church. My name's Carol Conley. I'm the director of the Christian Civic League, and we are honored to sponsor and co-host this event with the American Conservative Union and the Family Prosperity Index, and we'll be hearing more about those folks later. We just want you to know that downstairs there are restrooms in addition to the restroom that's up here. We want to be fairly casual tonight, so we know that some folks are going to be coming later, coming and going, and some folks just came from work, so don't be afraid to go back and get a drink or grab something to eat. We don't want to be that formal. I would ask that we would start the evening with a word of prayer. So if Dr. Jerry Mick, my pastor, who usually questions my attendance, so I'll make a remark about that before he does tonight, but I'm going to ask him to pray the Lord's blessing on this evening.
Shall we pray together? Our God and Father, we thank you for this opportunity this evening to gather many from the faith and non-faith community together to talk about a very serious problem here in our state. We ask, God, that the information that is disseminated would be useful, and Lord, that we might be able to help those that are struggling in addiction. Thank you for the League and those that are involved in helping others, and we just pray, God, that tonight, that all of us will learn and be better informed, and God, help us to seek to help those that are hurting. And we thank you for every person and organization that is here tonight. We ask your richest blessings upon them. Thank you for the evening, and bless everything that we say and do. And we ask this in our Savior's name. Amen.
We do have a plan for this evening, and it is a very involved program with our panel discussions and with the governor coming in later. We will do our best to stay within our time frames, but again, this is a very involved topic, and so therefore we have dedicated 2.5 hours at least to this very serious topic. And before we start, I want to recognize some of our special guests that are here, some of our representatives and senators. First of all, Representative Dick Campbell is here from over in the Orrington area. Representative Roger Reed from Carmel Herman. Where's Roger? My representative, Stacey Guerin. Peter Lyford from Eddington and Vesey and elsewhere. All the way down from Aroostook County, Representative Trey Stewart. And my senator, Andre Cushing, is here in the back. Andre and Trey are part of the opiate task force that is actually, and Andre is the co-chair, and they are actually convening tomorrow. So Trey was saying how appropriate that is. And also Dr. Mark Holbrook is here, from the running for the CD1 seat. Mark Holbrook made it all the way up from down in Brunswick. At this time, we have a video that we'd like to play to welcome and start things off.
Thank you, Carol, for organizing this important substance abuse symposium, and thank you, Dr. Mick, for hosting it. Now, we all know that substance abuse has reached an epidemic level in Maine and throughout America. About 6 in 10 of our Maine families is impacted directly or indirectly by opioid and heroin addiction. Now, our family is no exception. My late brother suffered from substance abuse for about 35 years. He was a great guy with a big heart and a very talented musician. Our family did everything we could to help Jim, but in the end, it got the best of him. Today, we know so much more about identifying this problem early and how to treat it. First of all, we can never give up on our loved ones. We're all God's creatures. Now, I know we can become angry and disappointed with the behavior of those who are suffering from addiction. But I can also tell you that those who have this disease do not want to be addicted. Now, the best way to start to help those who are in trouble is not to be ashamed and to step forward and to ask for help. There is help in the Bangor area and throughout our state. Now, some might need outpatient treatment while others need residential care. And yes, we need more beds, but you can still get help. We also need to hold our loved ones accountable for healthy behavior after detox. And we've got to stop this poison from entering our country and making its way to Maine. That's why I've been so tough on securing our borders. 98% of this heroin comes across our southwest border with Mexico. Now, unfortunately, law enforcement is being asked to help treat those who are addicted because we don't have enough clinical services in Maine. That's why I'm so supportive of making sure there's additional funding from Washington to help our men and women in blue and also our struggling families. The good Lord teaches us to care for those in need. It's so important that we show compassion for those at risk and do everything we can to help them. So please keep praying for all of our families that struggle with addiction, and keep praying for the safety of our law enforcement officials. And also, let me know whenever you think of anything else I can do to help. We're all in this together.
And you know that is our Congressman Bruce Poliquin. So I appreciate he couldn't be here. At this time, it is my honor to introduce our moderator, George Hale. Anybody that has grown up in eastern and northern Maine knows George Hale. I can say for me growing up, hearing that voice, listening to those basketball games down at the Bangor Auditorium, you know, talking about Tony Hamlin throwing up one from the Bangor house and so on. But I have a very special relationship. A lot of you know George. The accolades are just incredible. Hall of Fame for the New England Broadcasters, Hall of Fame in the sports legends. The only non-graduate of the University of Maine to get the Black Bear Award. It just goes on and on and on. But in many ways, George and my dad were very good friends and had great respect to each other. So I've really grown up knowing George. I know he's such a respected person in this community and in our state at large. So it is my honor to introduce our moderator for tonight, George Hale.
Well, thank you very much. Jerry is checking your church attendance. Believe me, Carol checks mine. He did suggest that the building might be checked after I leave tonight for the roof trusses to see if they broke. I will guarantee you I'm not a representative, I'm not a senator, I'm not running for anything. I'm usually running from something. But I'm honored to be here tonight. I was asked if I moderate, which basically means I know very little. But I'm going to ask those experts that are here tonight the questions. You know, we do our news stories every day, both Rick and I, and we're kind of detached from it. It becomes almost a blur at times. You do the story and then you move on. But there are real people. People say there's a lot of fake news out there. Well, there probably is. But I can guarantee you the stories that we do about substance abuse and the tragedy that occurs, it's not fake news. As a nurse said to me the other day, why don't you bring your panelists and your guests up to the emergency room here where I work? When you've seen somebody struggling with 3 people sitting on top of them as they OD'd out, you might get a big picture of what we're about. So tonight the purpose is one of education, really, about the nature of the problem, what it does to families. Now, I'll guarantee you that if we leave here tonight and say we've found the solution, we've absolutely failed, because we will not find the solution here tonight. But if we walk away thinking that we know a little more about the problem, then we can begin to make the move that will take us to where we want to go. There's no instant silver bullet. I've spent most of my life working with athletes and telling them, hey, don't do this. This is not a good idea. When I was a kid, we kind of instinctively knew that. People ask me, what's the difference between the athletes you dealt with back 30 years ago and the athletes and the young people of today? And I can simply say, it's easy. The athletes that I dealt with, the students that I dealt with, I think are a little better today than they were then. Frankly, I probably should have ended up in jail. We all got in trouble. The difference today is the weapons they have. We didn't have any weapons. We went to school, we went to play basketball, got in a little bit of trouble, had to report to the principal once in a while. And in my case, the dean of boys, who knew me quite well, and didn't want to know me any better than he did. But today the kids have a society that's breaking down around them. It's not their fault. It's not the addict's fault that the society has failed. So tonight we'll try to give you an idea. We have people who see it on a day-to-day basis, who see it in real life. what we talk about in the radio and TV business, what we call real time. Sometimes you see a ball game and you see the instant replay. But the umpire saw it in real time. He didn't have an opportunity to see over and over and over, and oh, gee, he was safe by 1 inch. And that's the same thing with these police officers and others who will be here tonight. They see it in real time. They see the underside of our society. We'll see what we can do about it tonight. I'm honored to be here tonight, and we'll bring our guests up here, and we'll see what we can accomplish in a relatively short period of time on a beautiful Maine night. So I thank you for inviting me. Our first panelist who will take a seat from the MDEA, Peter Arno. Peter, you raise your hand and sit in a seat next to me. Don't take my seat, that's my place. You ever watch Big Bang Theory? That's my place. Bangor Police Department Deputy Chief Dave Bushy. Dave, you sit next. The State Police Lieutenant Sean Hashey. Sean? Well, that was easy, you're in uniform. Even I can figure that one out. And our good friend, the Penobscot County Sheriff, Troy Morton. Troy? Very good. And of course, Scott Moody, who has worked as a public policy economist for over 18 years, and he's the first economist that I know of, that I've met. I've interviewed Scott a number of times, and I believe I've never asked one intelligent question of an economist, but we'll try tonight. Thank you very much. We'll see how we go. Okay. Well, the format is, gentlemen, that we're going to go 3 minutes. 3 minutes each one, okay? Tell it like it is. The second panel, if we have a minister, I might have to make that 8 minutes, but it's 3 minutes with you, gentlemen. And we'll start with Peter Arno. Peter, glad to have you here.
Thank you, George. It's good to be here. I appreciate the opportunity and the invite. As George said, my name is Peter Arno. I am currently the Division II Commander with the Maine Drug Enforcement Agency. I oversee operations in 4 of our 8 field offices around the state at Bangor, Augusta, Holton, and Ellsworth. For those of you who don't know, the Maine Drug Enforcement Agency is a state-run agency. We fall under the Department of Public Safety, like the state police. We are mostly comprised of law enforcement officers who come to us from local, county, state, and federal agencies who are assigned to us sort of on a temporary basis. So we've been talking about issues related to, let me just tell you, Maine Drug Enforcement Agency's main charge is to target mid to upper level drug trafficking organizations who are operating in the state of Maine, in order to disrupt and dismantle those organizations. The number one threat, of course, currently in the state is this whole issue surrounding opiates and opiate abuse. It's not really a new problem. I've personally been involved in talking about opiate issues since around 2000. And so, you know, this substance abuse or this opiate abuse issue has been a slow build since that time. Really, I think the most significant change from a law enforcement perspective is the fact that we, over the past 5 or 6 years, are now seeing out-of-state drug trafficking organizations who are setting up shop in Maine. And, you know, it's not only in Bangor or Augusta or Lewiston and Portland, it's some of the most rural areas of the state, Washington County, Aroostook County. You know, places you know, like that have been sort of relatively untouched by this sort of out-of-state drug trafficking element. And these organizations or these traffickers are here typically on behalf of, sorry, could have been worse, the cover could have been off. They're here on behalf of out-of-state, big city gangs. They're not here necessarily recruiting members to be part of their gang, but they're here to sort of exploit the opiate addicts that are in this state, to continue to sell their drugs and to transport currency, cash, and mostly guns out of the state. They are, in a lot of cases, ruthless, sophisticated, and pretty organized, all in all. So I'll kind of stop there. I'm happy to answer any of your questions that you might have.
Q&A at the end, yeah.
Perfect. I'll hand it off. Thank you, George.
Hi, my name is Dave Bushy. I'm the Deputy Chief for the Bangor Police Department. First of all, I just want to say thank you on a lovely evening like this that all of you people showed up tonight to talk with us, and I think it's for a good cause. I was very happy to hear from Carol earlier when he invited me to come in and speak with you. My background as a law enforcement officer, primarily as an investigator, I live and work in the Bangor area. So when we talked earlier, I spoke with Carol and said, what are the types of things that people really want to hear? And he brought up some really good points, and I think a couple of them that really connected with me is how does the drug problem affect people's families? And from my history as an investigator, I can tell you that we talk to people who will call us and will report family members who are stealing from them, and sometimes breaking into homes, breaking into cars, putting themselves at risk, basically to feed an addiction that has taken control of their lives. And I think anybody who works in law enforcement or has family members that are suffering with this problem can understand where that comes from. But I do want you to know that the Bangor Police Department is doing some forward-thinking things that are really, I think, you're going to be happy if you haven't heard about already that we're working on. We've been able to work with Bangor's public health director and Patty Hamilton, as well as at Katy Hospital, to create a full-time position that is basically a substance abuse counselor. Her name is Andrea Carver. She works full-time with us now. She works an evening shift. She goes out with our patrol officers on a nightly basis. And she's able to go to calls where somebody is in need and looking for help. And I can tell you this is a reasonably new position, but it's something that we're hearing very positive feedback from, which I was interested to see how our officers would receive having somebody new who is in a civilian position coming into law enforcement to work with us and go out and ride with us on a daily basis. And very happy to say that we've had positive interactions with the public. And so those are the types of programs I think looking forward that we need to continue with. I think it's a myth to say that police in general are out looking to arrest drug users. When that happens, typically it's because there's another crime that was related to it, and that's what we're handling. And unfortunately, jail is a consequence for some of the behavior. But really, I'm looking forward to some of the questions that some of you folks might have. I just wanted to give you a little glimpse of what we're doing now, and I'd be welcome to any new ideas. I think we're always looking for ways that we can improve what we're doing. So, okay.
Hi, my name is Sean Hashey. I'm with the State Police. I'm the Troop Commander at Troop E here in Bangor, and we cover Penobscot and Piscataquis County. So I've worked in this area my entire career, which has been 23 years. So I guess I'll come at you from the angle of just kind of explaining over my 23 years in law enforcement, how drugs have changed, what we do in law enforcement, what we deal with. And I almost think of it as, in the last 5 to 8 years, the accelerator has really been pretty much pushed to the floor. The first half of my career, the crimes that we responded to, dealt with, the same ones we do today, but they were rare then. Maybe something we dealt with a few times a year, and now it's a weekly basis. And I'm sure the other law enforcement partners would, could tell you the same stories. whether it be things such as homicides or robberies, all the way down to the problem we're seeing on the roadways of drug driving. It's much more significant than it ever used to be. So that kind of, I guess, when you look at the problem, overall, where I think law enforcement feels like we're really not able to combat it the way we used to. I think we felt like there was a point when we had a pretty decent handle on it, and now it's just such a huge and rapid problem. We're just not able to keep up. I think people are doing the best they can, but overall, it's everywhere. Everywhere you turn, drugs are playing a part in this. So I spoke to drug driving. We're seeing people getting in serious collisions, whatnot. Everybody talks about texting, but drug driving is a big problem as well. It takes a lot of our resources to deal with that. The other thing that I guess I'd like to point out is the effect it has on all the families. George talked about it a little bit. Congressman Poliquin talked about how 6 in 10 families are affected by it. I'd almost think it's higher than that. You think about, people talk about cancer and how somebody has a story about how cancer's affected them. I think drug use has affected most everybody as well. Whether you're a victim, you got a loved one that's addicted or whatnot, or you're hurt by a drug driver, your house was broken into, whatnot. And I guess I'm here to answer questions and try to give you the perspective of what law enforcement deals with on a daily basis as we try to combat this.
Good evening. My name is Troy Morton. I'm the sheriff of Penobscot County, but I want to say first that I think being gathered here tonight, this makes sense. That before I'm the sheriff, I'm a Christian. And I think that starting out here in the church and bringing folks together to address a social issue is incredibly important. This is where it needs to start. So bless all of you for coming out, taking time out of your evening to be here with the men and women that are addressing such a serious issue. I've been in the business for 27 years. I'll stand here, not speaking for each of these gentlemen, but I'll tell you that I believe that our mindset has changed. We know that substance abuse is a serious issue, and that simply sanctioning people does not fix the problem. That we have to attack this at a different level, and I think that we're doing that today. Law enforcement understands that prevention comes first. We need to make sure that we stop people from starting such a terrible journey. And then enforcement. We still have to enforce laws. We still have to stop the trafficking that comes in here. And then recovery. And we need to make sure that we understand recovery and work on those best practices to fix recovery. Today we know that substance abuse has no discrimination. There are no age limits. There are no economic boundaries, educational, or where you live here in the state. We see it all over. There was a time when I was a chief deputy for many, many years, I would get calls from family members, friends, businesses, telling me to please release their loved ones, their co-workers. They didn't belong in jail. They shouldn't be here. It's a sad day today as sheriff. I get those calls, and they're begging me to keep people in jail. They feel that this is the safe place for them, that they know that they're there and they're sober, because we don't have the programming that we need or the ability to get them into programming. Today our population, I'll just speak briefly of our population in the jail to talk about how big of a problem we have. We have a jail that was built, redesigned in 1989. It was designed for 136 beds. And I was a brand new corrections officer walking in there naive, and I saw 60 inmates. And I said, we will never fill this place. We never even used the third floor. Several years went by, the population continued to grow, and the state came in, made modifications to our facility, and changed the population to 157. This morning, when I came into our jail this morning to meet with my staff, we had 214 people incarcerated in Penobscot County. That does not include 30 more in other facilities and another 70 in home release or service programs. Again, this is a major issue for law enforcement. We know that most crimes are caused by those under the influence of substances or those under the influence of substances committing crimes in order to gain the means. I'm excited to be here and look forward to having this great discussion tonight, particularly with the panel that you have following us that talks about how to fix such a terrible social issue. We are excited, as well as these agencies. We've done some amazing things at the county jail through our faith-based program and another program that's called RISE. I'd be happy to talk about that as we get going. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Moody. I'm the co-director of the Family Prosperity Initiative, which is a project of the ACU Foundation. And before I begin, I want to remind everybody we have copies of our national study and our Maine-specific study on tonight's topic in the back. They're freely available, so please pick up a copy before you leave. I know I'm the odd duck here on this panel as an economist, and many folks on our Facebook page pointed that out, and what's an economist got to add to this discussion? Honorary badge. To answer that question, my path is, have had a path that's both personal and professional that's brought me here today. On a personal level, my wife and co-director of the initiative has come from a family that's marred by many of the statistics you see in these studies. Her parents have 6 divorces among them each. She has 5 siblings, and she's the only one basically to have made it out of that situation. Her step-siblings are marked by low educational attainment, crime, drug use, and divorce themselves. So we've known on a personal level that these issues matter, and they matter to the economy as well. And as part of my professional journey here, many of you may remember me as the CEO and Chief Economist of the Maine Heritage Policy Center from a few years ago. I know some of you are in the audience today. And during that time, I wrote a lot about Maine's demographic winter. That's where Maine's population, there's too few young people in the state to support current population levels. And as I examined this issue, I realized that it's going to take far more than economics to solve it. It's as much cultural as it is economic. And when you look at the latest numbers, in 2016, there were over 1,000 more deaths than births in the state. Now, if you take today's topic, if you were to add all the drug overdoses from 2016 and suicides, because those issues are actually related, add those together, you would have reduced that negative number by more than half. So the very first issue we need to deal with in Maine to get back on a path of population growth is to deal with the drug abuse problem. And if we don't, it's going to have serious fiscal consequences. Governor LePage a couple of years ago appointed me to the Maine Consensus Economic Forecasting Commission. In every meeting we had, we were discussing how Maine's labor force was already shrinking. This isn't a problem for the future. This is a problem that's here and now. And we actually had to scale back economic forecast as a result. Well, what does that mean for you? Well, less economic growth means less money to pay for government services, the law enforcement officers here, which either means to keep those services, your taxes are going to have to go up, or we're going to have to get the economy growing again. So this is a big issue. It affects every aspect of your life, and I'm excited to hear what these law enforcement gentlemen have to say. Thank you.
I'll take this one. We can use that. Okay. Thank you all for the presentation. Now we get down to facing some facts. So I think I'll go to Peter first. There are over 1 million people incarcerated in the United States right now. From some of the facts I've learned, 75% of those were involved in drug offenses. They have some 2 million children, minor children. What do you read into this? What does that stat tell you? We know we can't jail our way out of the problem. We've tried that. Well, when I tell you there's 1 million people in jail, most of them, or at least a high number of them, because they were involved in illicit drugs. What does that say to you?
Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of natural consequences for drug dealing. And, you know, if we're talking about this opiate problem, for those of you who have had family involved or know people involved, you know it doesn't take long for somebody who has an addiction to turn from an addict into a dealer. So most people, you know, even if they are able to hold down a job, can't support their habit, you know, on what they make with a weekly wage. So they have to turn to some crime in order to support their habit. They either steal cash or things they can convert to cash in order to support the habit. And I think that's what, you know, Deputy Chief Bushy was referring to of you know, people whose underlying issue is a drug abuse issue who get caught up in the spokes, so to speak, of criminal behavior. And, you know, for you or for me, who's a homeowner who, I don't know that we're all that concerned as victims if somebody breaks into our house and violates our privacy and our trust. I don't know, I think in most cases, people want some accountability for that. And so I think, you know, part of the issue with the population or the prison problem are people who have underlying substance abuse issues, you know, who sort of get caught up because of crimes they commit. So that is the difficult balance that I think, you know, we need to somehow maintain.
Thank you very much. Scott, would you maybe if you get the other mic going too. Scott, what is the cost of putting a person in jail? I read the other day that it runs up to as high as $65,000 a year. Now, we don't want to take the bad guys and put them out who commit violent crime, but we've got a lot of people in jail. How much of our economy is going into just jailing people?
Well, don't ask an economist to quantify cost, because that's a very big question. There is obviously the cost of the person in jail, but there's also a much broader cost to society. You know, many of those folks that you mentioned who are in jail currently are parents themselves. And so by definition, when you put one person in jail, you have broken up that family. And somebody now is a single parent, the mom or the dad. And all the academic literature now is coming out as clear that a child raised in a single parent household is going to face a number of disadvantages growing up, and is more likely to in turn commit crimes themselves and end up in jail. So when you're talking about cost, you have to include that intergenerational factor, because that's where you're going to break it eventually. So we need to be very careful about who we put in jail and who we don't.
Very good, thank you. Troy, we think of Acadia Hospital, we think of maybe a number of other facilities in the state. Right now, you head up the largest mental institution in the area. Am I correct?
Yeah, there's no question. Often when I do speaking engagements, I say I run the largest detoxification center in the state and the largest mental health institute in the state. Unfortunately, it seems like by default, we have become that with sometimes lack of services or lack of funding to get folks into services. Those folks find themselves in crisis. Crisis sometimes leads to crime, and crime leads to jail. And so we end up dealing with a large percentage of our population that falls into that default.
Let me swing over to Sean Hashey from the state police. People ask often, they'll say, why don't cops just stand down on the border and stop all those drug dealers coming over the border? That'd be easy, wouldn't it? They have a neon sign on top of the car, I guess. Hey, I'm a drug dealer, I'm from Brooklyn, I'm on the way. Not quite so easy, is it?
No, not at all. You know, drugs come into our state in a variety of methods. You know, what you're speaking of is, you know, coming up the highway, and we do that. We know we don't have the roadblock on the interstate at the Maine border or whatnot, but we have folks that are dedicated. That's their mission, is to basically do criminal enforcement on the highway and look for all types of crime, to include you know, these drugs that we know are coming up out of New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, whatnot, you know, originating at the U.S. border. But you know, there's there's a lot of other methods too that drugs are coming to our state, whether it be through tidal waters, through mail, through riding up on the Concord bus. It's coming at us from all angles. So if we were able to do that, they just make an end run around, because there's so many methods nowadays to be able to get drugs into our state. That
why is Maine so attractive?
Why? I think I speak for everybody when we believe it was really Maine's kind of been an untapped resource, if you will, for drug dealers. There wasn't a lot of established, dealing in Maine, and I think it was looked at by drug dealers that are, in a highly competitive area in other states, that Maine's kind of an easy target. They come to Maine. There's a lot of rural communities too, where talk to Dave Bushy. He has a lot of folks in the city of Bangor that are working drugs, that are on top of this issue. But what happens when those same people say, okay, we're getting a lot of heat in Bangor, we're going to move to Glenburn, Herman, Kenduskeag, Springfield, wherever. The law enforcement resources aren't as intense there, and it certainly makes it easier for somebody to set up shop, and we have less resources to deal with that.
All right, Dave, ball bounces into your court. I'm not afraid of, where's the governor? Is he here yet? The governor's been laser focused on stopping this problem since I've been dealing with it. Now, the voters in the state of Maine got really smart this last referendum. They said, hey, by a narrow margin, but hey, let's legalize marijuana. Let's go smoke pot for fun. Let's have some places where you can go and kick your shoes off and smoke a joint. Or Dad can go home, you have to do it on your property. Dad can come home, sit around the family table, smoke a joint, and tell his kids, hey, don't do what I'm doing. New problem coming for the police. I don't care who analyzes this problem, because I've looked at Colorado, I've looked at Washington, I have relatives in Colorado. They tell me a different story than I can tell you. I know one relative of mine who moved from one state to Colorado. Ask the states around Colorado what the problem is. What's going to happen here?
Well, I suspect that Scott would probably have some, he's probably chomping at the bit over there to comment on this. I can tell you I spoke with a prosecutor who lived and worked outside of Denver, Colorado. He came here and did some presentations, spoke to law enforcement about some of the challenges that we were going to face when marijuana was legalized. And the economic aspect in Colorado, I know has affected, had very negative effect on the communities there, because unemployment is increased. In law enforcement, and I'm just speaking honestly here, and I have friends that are conservative, friends that are more on the liberal side, and I listen to both sides. And the question is always brought up, is marijuana a gateway drug? And if you talk to law enforcement officers, in an honest answer, you're going to hear yes. Because where do you draw the line and say, this is acceptable, but this is not? Okay, is marijuana acceptable? And I think of it, I have 2 3-year-old boys, okay? So I'm looking at it as, what am I going to tell my children? Am I going to tell my children that it's okay to smoke marijuana? Am I going to tell them that it's okay to smoke tobacco? Am I going to tell them that it's okay for them to drink alcohol under the age of 21? Am I going to tell them that it's okay to take pills from a friend so that they can stay up and study for a test? These are all questions that, as parents, we have to answer ourselves. And I can tell you that I want my children to grow up and be happy, healthy, productive people. That's my goal as a parent. So to ask me if I feel that legalizing marijuana is going to be a problem, I say absolutely. And I'm basing it on conversations with somebody who has experienced it firsthand in a state that's legalized it. And I'm basing it on a personal set of values on what I want my children to abide by. And, and the governor's going to be here speaking. I personally appreciate somebody who is willing to speak the truth, regardless of You cannot always make everybody happy with your answers, but if you believe what you're saying and you say it with conviction, then I'm always going to listen to somebody's opinion. And I do appreciate the fact that sometimes he says things that he's not particularly concerned with how everybody's going to receive it. But the people that are listening and agree, I think really appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Well, Scott, we'll swing back to you. You've done tremendous research, both you and your wife. I've read your report on New Hampshire. I'm going to read the new book. About 50% of it I understand, but I'm okay. You know, after I get past batting averages, I'm usually in trouble. But one thing that jumps out is declining family structure. I mean, that's kind of a catch-your phrase, but it's true, isn't it? When I was a kid, we went to church 3 times a week, 4 times a week, played basketball in the church. That was our whole center of activity. The world has changed. There's a lot of weapons, as I said before. Why is this just changing the family structure so much, the way we live today?
Absolutely. The biggest, I think, untold story of the American family is unwed childbirth. The national average now is 40% of births are to unwed mothers. So that's the single greatest way single parenthood is being created in the United States. It's not divorce anymore, because divorce is actually dropping off because people aren't getting married in the first place. And as I mentioned earlier, the studies all coming out are very clear that a child growing up in a single parent household is going to face enormous challenges, from crime to drug abuse, low educational attainment, that a child in a married couple household will not. A contributing factor to that's kind of unique to not just Maine, but northern New England in general, is the decline in religion. We're now the 3 least religious. It changes, the bottom 3, but it's Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont are all vying for the bottom. It's going to be hard to rebuild the family when marriage no longer has the religious context that it originated from. And that's one reason why we are having this discussion today in a house of worship, for that reason. And there's a very strong correlation between religiosity among the states and illicit drug use. So New England in general is low religious attendance, high illicit drug use rate. States like Alabama, Mississippi, and Utah, high religious attendance and low illicit drug use. Despite some of the other challenges those states have, drug use is not among them. So it's going to require all of us, civic leaders, law enforcement, religious leaders, to solve this problem.
3 law enforcement officers, 4 actually, sitting back. You didn't have a uniform on, so I don't mean to say you're not a law enforcement officer. Policemen tell me the toughest job they face ever is knocking on the door. You know what I mean, don't you? Deputy Chief, when you have to walk up the stairs and knock on the door and tell, you don't have to tell, right? The mother collapses. Troy? Is it? The father is stunned, the mother's down on her knees. Somebody's gone because they were drunk driving or they were overdosing. That's got to be tough.
You know, George, you're absolutely right. It's one of the things that our career professional has not done a real good job of taking care of the officers in how we handle these stressors. If you can imagine the amount of times that we've had to go to homes and share tragic news about things that we've seen, and sometimes we see this coming. It's the same that when we've seen tragedy that we could almost see it coming because you've seen the path of somebody's journey. But I'll take it one step further. Not only, it goes back to what I talked about. There's no discrimination in substance abuse. These aren't just going to families and telling them that we've seen somebody pass or overdose. It could be something that touched many of us sitting here on the stage personally when we watched one of our own daughter die of a drug overdose. And we stood there while she was trying to be revived through the use of Narcan and other things. This is such an issue. You know, it's not just us going out and making those notifications. These are touching our families. They're touching all of us. There was a time that I think that you could speak to any community group and ask, how many of you folks here in this crowd have somebody affected by cancer? Generally everybody would raise their hand, family, loved ones, business people, neighbors. Well, today I think if we're honest and we're reducing stigma, which is crucial, and we reduce stigma, we will ask that same question and many folks will raise their hand.
We're going to take some Q&A here in just a few moments. Peter, this afternoon I had a great time holding my great-granddaughter, the latest. They keep giving me so many, I'm going to run into one someday, not know who they are, there's so many of them. That's my greatest fear. Who are you? But she's like 2 months old. She got everything, My daughter, this is Amazon Prime Day. I'm sure that we just went broke today. She'll have everything, but 8% of babies born in this state are drug addicted because the mother was on something. I don't know what it is. It's horrible. You must run into that.
We do, and I often think, I have two daughters myself, a 25-year-old and a 22-year-old, and I'm blessed every day because my kids made it to this point in their lives without a lot of tremendous difficulty, either to themselves or to their parents. And I often think about what we did right in order for them to make it to where they are today. And I have to tell you, I'm not sure that I know the answer, other than to be involved in their lives, to know who they hang around with, and just to be there for them. But I'll tell you, there are a lot of families who do that, and things don't turn out the same way. So, I don't know. I know what puts kids at a higher risk for sure, parents who aren't involved in their lives, but there's a certain amount of parenting that goes on that's the right way, that doesn't often lead to the same result. And this whole issue around drug-addicted babies, and I don't know what the answer is, and I know it's an issue, and it's going to be an ongoing issue into the future.
And that's why we're here tonight in this part of the forum, to identify the problems. We're going to do some Q&A, and we have some lovely people out there who I'd like you to come to the aisle to make it easier. We pass the microphone around, it would be difficult. So she has a microphone, and if you raise your hand or stand, you can ask a question of any one of our panelists. We'd be happy to try to answer it for you.
You hold up. Hi, Carl Gollivan. I'm a retired special agent, U.S. Customs. I was in South Florida for 17 years. And ask you a question about where all the drugs come from and what your interactions with the federal authorities. My experience is that as U.S. Customs, we're keeping out the competition for a degree of trafficking that really occurs at the official sanctioned level. And in history, one can find the source for that as evidence. The opium wars between Britain and China. Britain actually went to war with China to compel China to allow continued importation of opium. They won those wars, and as far as I know, the Crown has never renounced the trafficking of opium as a source of revenue. And literally, at the intelligence level, drug trafficking occurs, and it's a means of, creating a dysfunctional society where more and more law enforcement is required. Are any of you, can any of you answer the question, when did, for example, the British ever renounce trafficking in opium since they won the opium wars?
I was having a little trouble hearing you.
Yeah, I was too. I didn't catch a lot of that myself, but could you just state your question one more time? I'd be happy to try to field it, but I'm not sure. It might be easier without the microphone.
The difference, the audio is kind of bouncing around.
I think most people are familiar with the movie Kill the Messenger, Gary Webb, the story that there was CIA complicity in trafficking of cocaine through Central America to finance Iran-Contra. There is trafficking in drugs at an intelligence level that drug enforcement just helps keep out the competition or punish those who get out of line with the official trafficking. So my question is, how do we deal with this except at the source, where today even U.S. troops are guarding poppy fields in Afghanistan? Who are they guarding those for, if not for officially sanctioned trafficking?
Yeah, I understand. I think I understand where you're coming from, and you know, from I don't want to get into a debate necessarily with you about you know, who's covering up what, because you know, we could be here all night. But I know that, you know, as far as the drugs that we're seeing in the state, you know, they're coming from a multitude of source countries. They're coming across the Mexican border. They're coming in from Colombia. Most recently, some of the synthetic drugs that we're dealing with, the fentanyls, are all, you know, are all clandestinely manufactured. A lot of them in China, and they're coming to us, you know, through the mail. And those are the really potent drugs, and we're having a hard time keeping up with scheduling those drugs, because just when we outlaw, you know, make one of the fentanyls illegal, they change the chemical makeup, you know, so that it's molecularly a little bit different, so then it doesn't fall under the schedule, but it's equally as dangerous. As for, you know, who's supporting who in this effort, that's really just not a conversation that I think, you know, I'm willing to get into.
Troy?
I'll just throw a quick point onto that. I think we have to remember first that many of the opiate addiction problem here in the state of Maine didn't come from overseas. It happened right through pharmacies, doctors, pain management issues, people trying to mass trauma. And so that's where much of this started. I agree that the ongoing influx coming into our state, coming into our country, has to be addressed. Now, I used to be very critical of our medical profession and our pharmacies. They've come a tremendous long ways. I think they'll be the first to admit it, that they have changed practices, better education for our doctors. And some of us, we're the people to blame in some of that, right? We don't want any pain. And so a doctor's trying to take care of that. So, you know, I remember back in the early 90s is when I first went to a burglary in a home, and the TV was there, the VCR's there. I said, "How do you know you've been robbed?" And they took me to the bathroom where the medicine cabinet had been rifled through. And so that's when we first started seeing this real serious issue of opiate addiction through prescription medication.
All right, anyone else could like to, certainly, maybe you come right down here so that the audio bounces around a little bit, this high ceiling, get you a chance to ask a question. Happy to do it.
Good evening. My name's Pastor Adam Lee from a Bible-believing Baptist church in Gray, Maine. I have a couple of men here with me tonight, and the primary reason that we're here is to hear from you gentlemen. We're a small church, faith-based organization, and the big question is, what can local churches do? What practical things can you suggest that we can do, both to prevent? We have a pretty vibrant youth ministry, and I believe that those kids who come to it will have an ounce of prevention, but to go beyond that, to aid in the already existing victims and such. But I'd be interested to hear some concepts, ideas that you might suggest to local churches, how we can come along to aid in actual practical, real ways to meet the needs in our community.
I don't mind jumping on that one. I don't want to hog the mic here. Typical politician, sheriff, right? I want to say that we have a little over 100 volunteers at the Penobscot County Jail that come into our facility and provide faith-based peer mentoring to our men and women in our facility. And I've been criticized for saying this before, but the response and the success by having that happen is outstanding. Better than any medication, better than any treatment program. It's part of it. It's certainly one of those things that work. And there are several programs locally here in our area that provide residential treatment and faith-based programs. I think it's one of the things that we actually testified in front of our legislators to talk about opening those doors through legislation to allow for faith-based treatment to be an option and not an afterthought. I think we'll certainly get there, and there's some great programs here. I think the mindset of what can the church do is open those doors, have those conversations. Don't be afraid about stigma. Stigma is one of the biggest problems I think that we're trying to overcome in addiction today, is the stigma of those that we can't find them jobs, or we can't find them the ability to walk into a church because somebody looks at them funny. We have to realize that this is a social problem affecting us all. And there's some tremendous stuff being done by our churches.
Thank you.
Just to that point, I mean, I think, for a lot of us, there's a real critical time period when people come in contact with the law that sort of redirects them to want to get better. That's a pretty short window, and in a lot of cases, really almost every case, even the most well-intended law enforcement officer who wants to get somebody the help that they need, be it in a treatment facility or through some faith-based program, it is difficult to pick up the phone and get somebody the help that they need when they need it. So, I think one of the things that for those of you who are interested in starting programs like this is to be that bridge, even if you don't have your own program, but be that bridge for that time between when they have contact with the law and when they can get into a program that can make some meaningful difference in their lives. And I see Pastor Graves here, and I know from a Maine drug enforcement perspective, we've called on him a number of times to take people who have had a brush with the law and get them the help that they need. And I think you're going to be on a panel after this, and I think you could probably speak to that.
Scott, that kind of translates over to you a little bit here. In your research, Maine has one of the lowest church attendance rates in the country. Is there any, not probably lowest in New England, a couple of other New England states are pretty poor. We're down around, the 25, 27% rate of people who claim that they're church affiliated. Why is it so low? Do you have an idea?
No, that's a great question. Why is religious attendance so low? I don't have an easy answer for that, but you're right. I mean, it's Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire the lowest. Then the rest of the New England states follow very closely behind. But what we do know is there are consequences for that, as we've heard here. Faith-based substance abuse treatment centers, as well as outreach, are the most effective. And as we'll hear from the governor here shortly, I'm sure, he cites startling statistics that if you're on heroin, you only have about a 20% of ever getting off. You're more likely to die from it, unfortunately, than to get off of it. Those aren't very good odds, and we need every arrow in the quiver that we can get a hold of to fight this.
Thank you very much. I think we're running close to where we want to be. Am I correct? It's the old radio and TV thing coming back. When they tell me that the break is coming, I know the break is coming. No, the governor has a very tight schedule. I believe he's due here at about 7:30. That clock is 4 minutes fast. So at 7:33, I've got about a half a minute here. So if everybody just wants to stand and stretch, Carol is coming, and the governor is going to grace us with his appearance and give us, I'm sure, an inspirational speech. Thank you very much.
I promised the governor I wouldn't give a very long introduction. I know you're here to hear him and not me, but just a couple things I want to say. I appreciate Paul LePage. I'll tell you what, he needs to know that he's among friends here tonight. Things that are important to us are important to him, and I'll tell you what, Paul LePage has a heart. And this is an issue that burns deep with him. I know he cares about it, and I know good people see the same problem, and sometimes we seek different solutions. But this is a man with passion that doesn't care about political correctness or anything else, that wants us to see us solve this problem. The other thing that I want him to know as he makes his way out, that I got this Calvin Klein suit for $94 at the Waterville Martins just a couple weeks ago. But I want you to give a welcome to our friend Governor Paul LePage.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I miss those Martins deals. Now that I've left, I lost my 20%. I really want to thank you for inviting me this evening. And as you've heard, this is very, very important and passionate part of our lives. My wife and I both are very, very concerned about what's happening to our state. And one of the points that I want to focus on this evening is the importance of building back our families, to encourage our kids to succeed. It really does start right at home. And believe me, when I tell you, I've lived the American dream because not of my biological family, but by two other families that brought me up into this world. And I can't tell you enough how important it is to have a support system around your success. And that's where the family comes in. You know, when you provide the children the opportunity to succeed, you can overcome these generational poverty, these drug issues. You can overcome so many different issues, and you can even become governor. We need to encourage a commitment to the things and the ideas bigger than ourselves. This issue of drugs is really bigger than us. It's bigger than each and every one of us in this room. It is really about focusing in on what really drives our society. We need our religious institutions. We need our community organizations. We need pouring the good we have onto others. And you know, as a governor, it's a no-win situation because right off the bat, 50% are gonna like you, 50% are gonna dislike you from day one. And you hope that over 8 years you can get to 50+1. And you can leave and say, okay, I did my best. But sometimes it's more than doing your best. Sometimes you have to do something that you don't really like doing, but you know it's necessary. The drug epidemic we face in our state is something I've been talking about for many years in my administration. And frankly, we're making very little progress. We're making very, very little progress in Augusta. Last year, the state of Maine spent $80 million in general fund appropriations on substance abuse treatment in the state of Maine. That's without having private insurance companies, without having families, jails, public safety, charity care in our hospitals. This is all beyond that. There was $80 million and then an equal amount spent in other areas of our state. And what do we get for it? Get 1,000 babies born a year addicted to drugs from their mom's drug use. Last year, 378 people died of overdose in the state of Maine. How did the drugs get here? First, it was heroin. First it was our doctors. It was the medical profession. Started out with the medical profession, and then when the state tried to tighten up the use of opiate drugs through prescription monitoring and controlling the amount that a doctor can prescribe, then heroin came in. Now it's been substituted with carfentanil, which is probably the most deadly drug there is known to man. In 2014, our administration was able to get the Democrats in the legislature to fund more drug enforcement agents. And now I say this very specifically, Democrats, because it was a battle with the leadership of the Democratic Party and the ACLU. This year, it's gotten even worse. This year, I fought the entire legislature, to get the state to follow federal law when it comes to suspending the license of those convicted of drug offenses. It's a federal law. And because we're not following it, we lost $13 million of federal funding for highways. In previous years, I worked with the legislature and said, you know, guys, we're going to have to address this. We've got to make this, pass this law in Maine. They refuse. Last week, a letter went to the federal government saying, well, the governor signed it in the past, he won't sign it anymore. Let me tell you why. Because I finally come to the realization that you can't put a price on life. We have to keep our people alive. You know, some of the issues that we did confront and were successful with, we strengthened the opiate prescribing limits. 75% of our addicts started out with pills from the medical profession. Now we've passed some strict laws limiting the amount and duration of opiate prescriptions that can be prescribed. For chronic use, you can go to 30 days. For acute use, it's 7 days. I'll tell you, I remember a decade ago, I got back surgery. They gave me a great big bottle of opiates. I took one of them, and that was it. It made my head go spinning around, and I never took another one. And then I guess every once in a while, you go to the police. The state police will have a program where you can bring them in and you can give them away. So now we need to control how many pills and opiates are being prescribed. One successful area in the state of Maine, and I'm very, very proud of this, we've cut the opiate prescribing in the state of Maine by 50%. We are having success in the opiate world, but we're not having any success in the illicit world. So what's happened? Heroin's in, carfentanil's in, and that's causing us a lot of headaches. It's really a real problem that we're trying to find solutions to. You know, creating accountability for treatment programs is another area that we've had marginal success in. Expert recognized replacement therapy like methadone, Suboxone as best evidence-based treatments available. And I don't disagree with that. If it's tied to counseling and if it's tied to treatment programs. Picking up your weekly supply of drugs at the methadone clinic and having it on the street by noontime isn't a way to solve this problem. And so we need to fight back. You know, people outside the treatment community widely recognize just replacing one drug for another does absolutely nothing to solve the problem. We need to have counseling, we need to have therapy, and I will tell you something else. What's proving out in Maine is religious-based treatment programs are working. And I'll tell you, whenever we have any money left in our contingency account, we try to spread it around the state to see if we can get some treatment from Aroostook County to Machias, Maine to Kittery to help those programs that are always looking for resources, and we know that they're working. So we are committed to working with them. You know, we've recently added significant requirements to our Medicaid program to ensure accountability. There again, took a lot of criticism from the legislature. We want Maine people, and for that matter, all people, to be free of addiction. And not just opioids, but alcohol or any other addiction that's affecting your life, your ability to perform as a productive member of society. We need to help wherever and whenever we can. We're going to continue to monitor these programs. We're going to continue to make adjustments where we feel necessary. But I assure you one thing, for the next year and a half that I have left, I'm not backing down. We need to continue supporting pregnant moms struggling with addiction. Medical providers have begun using a screening tool to help pregnant moms with addiction get the treatment before and after they give birth. It's not enough to just go to the birth and have the birth and then try to give the child away to a grandparent or, kinship folks or foster homes. We have to get treatment. We have to make these people better and productive. We have right here in Penobscot County, at the Penobscot County Jail, the sheriff has been good enough to have a pilot program, a Vivitrol, to try to help inmates transition off the addiction while they're in jail, so that they don't have get away from the blockers that it wants to give them the opiate cravings. We're trying to get them so that they get a leg up on when they leave the prison. We're trying to make sure that they change their environment. If you go back to your same old friends doing the same old things, you're going to be back in relapsing. And so we're really trying to figure out what are some of the dynamics that we can work with to help these folks. I talked to you about the federal drugs, the loss of federal funds. Well, today, not only has our legislature failed us, but people that I appointed to the Liquor Commission have failed us. The little nibs, 50 milligrams, those little bottles, we're picking them up all over the highways. Well, guess what? We're picking I don't care if you put a nickel or a dime or 15-cent returnable. They're not going to keep the empty nips in their cars. They're going to throw them on a sidewalk. So the problem is littering, and the problem is we're ignoring a symptom of a problem in our state, and that's drinking and driving, and we have to stop it. And I don't just blame on Democrats. I blame it on the entire legislature and on my inability to pick people that could see the handwriting on the wall that this is the bad thing. We got to stop them. And we're not going to give up. I'm going to fight to do everything I can to get these off the streets. They're just, now I just recently heard from a high school principal say, you don't know half of them. You find them in the locker rooms. You find them in backpacks. Because it's not just drinking and driving, it's kids that can hide it from their parents. It's a problem. It's too easy. Let's get rid of them. It's just that simple. And it's too good a deal. 500 mLs is $9.99. 375 ml in a little bit bigger bottle is $9.99. So let's price it accordingly. I'll tell you, in closing, before I open up for questions, it is really important that we, the Maine people, not only deal with this epidemic as a community, as a religious community, as a community of caring people, and to try to take our services that we have available, which are limited resources, to help others. But we can't just look at government to solve this problem. You cannot put a price on a life. And I've beginning to realize that more and more. And not only just on epidemic, but tomorrow I'm going to do some PSAs on distracted driving. Same issue. Same issue. Technology's gotten so quick and fast and easy that we're driving a car and we're writing letters or texting people. And it's killing our youth. Actually, it's killing many people, but our youth have a bad habit. We need to convince them that they got to leave the technology away from their hands when they're driving. So what we really need in all, folks, is to think beyond today and beyond tomorrow, but next year and the year after. We want to see those little babies that are born addicted off the addiction, put into homes where they can grow to be productive citizens. This is 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the road. I spoke to a physician who told me, I said, Steve, when do you think it's going to take to get a hold of this epidemic? When are we going to start seeing the light? And he said, I'd say between 2021 and 2022. And I says, you're kidding me. He said, well, do the math. 90% of this generation on drugs will die before we get a hold of this. And he said, the best advice I can give you is go to the middle schools and start educating our kids. We've lost the high school crowd. We got to start early. So folks, thank you for being here. Thank you for not drinking and driving. Thank you for caring enough to take a warm, sunny day, evening on a sunny July evening, and I see George is still here and the All-Star game's on. I mean, he's really dedicated. So thank you all so very much, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Governor. I'll point to him and you answer. All right, we have mics, so just raise your hand, and Jackie and I, do we just have one mic? Okay, so any questions for the governor about drug policy? Right back over here to my right.
Now we legalize marijuana. Where are you going to stand on that? I mean, we've opened another gateway for the kids to have.
Delay, delay, delay. I am doing everything I can to try to get the federal government to jump in and take responsibility at a federal level for this problem. And I think the Attorney General is making some headway. For instance, in order to own a gun now, if you use marijuana, whether it's medical or recreational, you cannot buy a gun. So they're slowly making some inhibiting it, and I absolutely agree. You know, we got the NIPS, we've got the marijuana, and we now, we're losing money now. It just doesn't make sense. Let's get control, let's get this under control, let's understand it better, and then if you choose to weaken the laws later on, do it when I'm gone.
Any others? Other questions for the guy? Right here. Please wait for the mic because we are recording and this is live streaming.
I just want to thank you, Governor. I appreciate all the tough choices you make in the state of Maine. Me working for a faith-based program, City Reach, I was on the streets of Bangor and I was crying out to God and he pulled me out of that mess, so I didn't cost the taxpayers anything to go through the recovery program that I went through. So my question to the state is, as we find people that don't believe in God, how do we pull them out of that mess when they're in fear of detoxing in a bed that has no medical staff? So my question is, that money we save the taxpayers, maybe we could take another look at getting some state beds in the detoxes so we can go in and pull them out and show them the love of Jesus Christ. So that's my question.
I absolutely agree with you, and I think that we're seeing it day in, day out, that faith-based programs seem to have the best impact on the preventing the relapse. We are building a 200-bed facility. The 200-bed facility in Windham is going to be tied to our county jails so that we're going to have the program that's available both inpatient and outpatient from Windham is going to be available throughout the state. So, people are scattered around the state. And as I said earlier, we're going to try to move people from their current environments to new environments. So It's a very, very important issue. This whole issue with drugs is going to take one person at a time, and it's very, very difficult. And I will tell you, the best place to start is to rebuild our families. That's really where I think the biggest impact is going to be. So we can throw money at it. And I will tell you one thing that we're doing in the state. Another thing that we've done in the state, which I think is unfortunate. Now, I believe that Narcan will save lives. However, if you allow it to go 12, 13, 14, 15 times getting shots, the odds are against you. So we have to say, when we give you a shot, you've got to go to rehab or pay for it.
Couple more questions. The governor's got a tight schedule right back here. Yes, sir.
Governor, we've heard about the breakup of the family. We've heard that the kids are not getting direction. You've talked about reaching into the middle school to teach the kids to not use these substances. Governor, you have churches out there, you have a faith-based community. We would love to introduce faith to our children in some way. The best venue to reach our kids is where? Where are they all every day?
Schools.
They're in the school, Governor. Is there no way that we could teach faith to our kids
I've tried.
in our schools?
I have tried on 2 occasions since I've been the governor to allow religious-based schools to be funded through the state system. I really believe in it. I'm a product of parochial school, but we've just not been able to get the legislature to agree. I will tell you, education comes in many different forms. Some kids learn with their hands, eyes, mouth, ears. Some learn by repeating. I made a career using my mouth, and I got away with it for 68 years. So yes, I absolutely believe that the introduction of private schools and the charter schools, we're making headway. But boy, I'll tell you, when you bring religion into Augusta, they read the Constitution just the opposite of what it was intended. And I firmly believe that.
One last question. Right here. One last question.
I was just at a Faith and Justice Summit on human trafficking a few months ago, and they were talking about how drug addiction was sort of, intertwined in that whole problem. Can you talk a little bit about how the drug trafficking task force as well as the human trafficking task force are interrelated in Maine?
I can't tell you a whole lot about both of them because they run mostly by the legislature and not by our staff, but I will tell you this, there's no question about it. Don't think for a second that the drug trade and human trafficking trade are not one and the same, and they're intertwined. In fact, these young women that are addicted, they're put on to sell themselves to get the drugs that they need from the same people who traffic in them to feed their habits. So it is a very, very serious. I will say this, though. I think we have a long ways to go, but I will tell you that the legislature in the last few years has taken the appropriate steps to deal with human trafficking in a much more serious manner than it had the first term that I was in government. And I will say, Senator Volk and I don't always agree, but Senator Volk has been really strong on the human trafficking part of our problem in the state of Maine. So while I do believe there's a long ways to go, I think that they need to talk more to those that have been in the problem, that have had the problem. They sometimes sit in glass houses and they talk about problems they know nothing about. So I think they got to get down to the streets and start meeting some people and talking to people, and I think we are making some progress in the human trafficking. I wish we were having as much success with the drugs, but we aren't.
Governor,
thank you all.
so much. I will just say quickly before we take a 10-minute break, we've got some great ministries, the very thing we've been talking about, to help out here, to get back and grab something to eat and then come right back in. But, you know, to talk about understanding what's allowed and not in the school as far as religious instruction, elections have consequences. That's the answer. You get the right people down there that understand the Constitution and to help the governor, and those that are in a legislature that understand that. That's the difference. We are going to take 10 minutes. Dan Schneider's going to call you back in 10 minutes, so please be watching the clock. Have a great time.
We all know that our economy isn't what it used to be. But how do we know for sure just how well or how poorly it's doing? We follow the jobs report and the stock market, but how accurate and complete are these as measures of prosperity? At the same time, we know American families are not flourishing like they once were. But do we know why? And is there a connection between the state of our economy and the state of our families? For the first time since Dr. Bill Bennett's landmark research on the leading cultural indicators in the 1990s, we now have a way to use government data to score the economic and social well-being of families from year to year and from state to state. The Family Prosperity Index. As the Dow Jones Industrial Average measures the rise and fall of the stock market, the Family Prosperity Index measures the strength and prosperity of families and the nation by combining the most important social and economic data into a single number. We can now measure U.S. progress every year and rate states against each other by how well they are providing an environment for families to prosper and flourish. President Ronald Reagan once said, "For us, faith, work, family, neighborhood, freedom, and peace are not just words, they're expressions of what America means. Families stand at the center of our society." Information is power. By providing a more complete picture of what prosperity looks like, the Family Prosperity Index gives us all a more powerful voice for positive change and a roadmap for finding real solutions that will make a difference for families and thus for our nation. Find out how your state ranks at familyprosperity.org.
We have a big problem in this country. We haven't grown the economy in virtually 15 years. The problem is American values, traditional American values, and the decline of the culture of family and marriage. And only we can change this.
I was just a young, wonky budget math guy working for Bill Bennett at Empower America. I helped crunch numbers on one of the versions of the leading index of cultural indicators. I salute you, and I know you're creating this index, which is fantastic because we have to communicate to our fellow citizens that this doesn't have to be this way. We have to show what's happening to the economy. We have to show the degradation of our culture, of the breakdown of the family, and so that we can build the kind of outrage we need to help resuscitate and get the American idea back on track. If we give the country a really clear and compelling choice, we can get our nation turned around. And we can't frame this choice if we don't have a good way to spell out the consequences. And so all I would say is, hallelujah, amen, and thank you for doing what you're doing, and just keep it up.
How are families doing in America today? There isn't a way to measure in a coherent, unified way. The reason we've never been able to do this for families is because it's really, really hard. It takes mathematicians to figure out how all the variables are connected. Dr. Wendy Warchola, Scott Moody, Wendy and Scott, they have an incredible amount of experience in this space. This is not the first index that they've created, and it's both an academic and intellectual experience as well as something that's very personal.
The Family Prosperity Index is a measure that takes a vast array of economic and social data, boils it down to one number for every state, and then ranks those states based on which state is the best environment for families. Up until now, there's never been a measure that brings the economic factors and social factors together to create a complete view of the whole person, of human behavior, a whole holistic view of human behavior and well-being, and its impact on the economy.
What you are seeing unveiled today is absolutely unprecedented. I believe it's a game changer. This is an incredible opportunity for people like me who engage elected officials, who want to see good policy passed, not because I'm a political ideologue, but because I'm a champion for families.
Family Prosperity Index is all based on highly credible government data, and the analysis is drawn from unbiased published sources. So it's comprehensive in scope, so we can get a true understanding of family prosperity within a state.
I've been married to a wonderful woman for almost 18 years. Most of what she does is invisible. GDP only sees her when she goes to the grocery store. GDP does not see her when she teaches my 3 children how to make a good life. It's an exciting time to be looking at a tool that takes the kinds of things that we know matter, and we know that the economics matters, and we know that some of these more social measures also matter too, and we pull them together.
I can't wait to take the data that is being supplied to legislators and to talk to them about what we have seen in this report. To be able to craft policies that help families truly thrive.
So now imagine, as advocacy leaders in your state, a broader and stronger coalition that you can build behind your think tank or your group or whatever kind of organization you represent. What if you could be armed with new and potent information and a whole new angle to change that debate? We can be confident now that in raising critical questions, we have the moral high ground, something we've always lacked. They always claim the moral high ground. We claim the numerical high ground. Now we can have both.
Strong families have a very strong economic impact. It's good for our economy. It's good for our country. And of course, the opposite is true too. Good policies that result in a strong economy, it's good for families.
We are doing incredibly well on the timing, so again, just thank for all our participants and so on. Great questions. I would ask that you would please make your way. We want to try to stay on time. If you could make your way back to the auditorium, we'd greatly appreciate it. Any of you that have any political acuity and are paying attention to what's going on in the United States these days, you've probably heard of CPAC. And I've heard of CPAC many times. Always been thankful that our national partners like Focus on the Family and Family Research Council have been invited and be part of the table at CPAC. I actually get to go to CPAC, which is probably the #1 political gathering in the United States each year in Washington, D.C. I get to go to my first one just this last time, so it's so exciting. But CPAC is sponsored by the American Credit Union. They do a great job with it. And I want you to know that the American Conservative Union, the first time that I heard of them before that was an invitation to go out into Utah and to discuss what's going on in issues in regard to religious freedom, and other issues like that. And I thought, here is an organization that has the same values that I have, and they actually deal with a much broader swath of issues in regard to the economy and so on. I'm so thankful that, and it's really an honor for us to be able to co-sponsor something like this with Dan Schneider and his organization. I'd ask you to give Dan a welcome, a Maine welcome, as he comes up and talks a little bit about the ACU.
I'm not actually going to talk a whole lot about ACU because that would be boring. This has been an amazing forum where we have really understood better the impact on the lives of people. And as a conservative, everybody who works for me at the ACU understands what conservatism is. It's a political philosophy that sovereignty resides in the person. Where does that sovereignty originate? If not the state, it starts with a person, but where do those rights come from? That's right. And as a creature of God, I care about God's children. And that's why this opioid crisis is so terrible, because these are human beings whose lives are being wasted. Governor LePage, not surprisingly, had what I think is the best line of the whole night. He said, "You can't put a price on life. We have to save lives." I think the second best line of the night was also from the governor. And he said that it's families that will be the first solution to this problem. Well, I want you to just pause for a moment. You can't put a price on life. Families will be the solution. Well, how do we measure our results? If you can't put a price on it. We wouldn't have this conference today if it were not for Dr. Wendy Warcholik and her husband, Scott Moody. Would you two please stand up? Please stand up. They are two of the finest economists in the country, and they have answered the question I've just presented to you. This thing that seems, did Governor LePage contradict himself? He can't put a price on life, but the solution is with family. How are you going to measure those results? They have come up with the way. So I know many of you have taken the booklet and then the Maine specific guide on families. They have created the Family Prosperity Initiative, the centerpiece of which is an index. And now an index is a short word, only 5 letters, but it's a very complicated thing. We know how well washing machines are sold in this country because the U.S. Commerce Department publishes the Durable Goods Index. These things are very sophisticated, complicated. They have done the hard work, the research analysis, the economic graphing and everything to come up with an index that measures the health and well-being of families. Maine, what's Maine's rating right now in the country? 39th out of 50. Maine's got a lot of room for improvement. And with the governor's leadership, and there are some very good members of the legislature here in Maine, we can make more improvement. But I started off telling you what conservatism is. It's a political philosophy that sovereignty resides in the person. I'm going to ask one more question of you all. What is the fundamental unit of government? The person. The person is the fundamental unit of government. That's why our Constitution begins and ends with "we the people." And the last word in the Bill of Rights is the person. Our founding fathers understood that our gift from God is freedom, and our rights are given to us by God. It's our responsibility now to see if we can extend freedom, if we can work in this government to govern ourselves so that we can be free and to exercise the rights God has given us. And the biggest crisis facing Maine today is the opioid crisis. So as I sit down, I've probably taken too much time already, how can you govern Maine? How can you address this problem? How can you work with a very fine governor who, by the way, his invitation, come back to CPAC is in the mail, so don't tell him. But it's in but he's coming back to CPAC, hopefully. And Carol, we want you at CPAC this year, too. Actually, that's 2018, to speak on the main stage. Hope you'll join us. Thanks a lot.
Well, we are on time, which is a miracle and a half. Well, I'm in the great church. We have miracles here, right? Why am I surprised? We talked about factors contributing to substance abuse with law enforcement and economics. They're all interrelated. We're going to switch a little bit now in this first meeting for the second part of our panel, how the family and the community get affected by substance abuse. We have a great panel. First off, they'll come up and they can sit in order like we did the first time. Nathan Sir Meal from Liberty Bay Recovery. Nathan? Nathan has a J at the end of his name, and did I come close? Good. In a fast break basketball game, you might have lost that. Somebody I know quite well, the pastor of Calvary Chapel, Ken Graves. Ken? Good to see you, my friend. Now, Scott Moody was with us before, and Scott, you have to come back. Now, John Wilsey is with us. He's from a group called Teen Challenge Maine. And if he can join us. It's a long walk, but it's good. Good to have you up here. All right, very well. Let's see, Ken's got more hair than any of us. But it's changing color since I met you a few years ago. Is that due to your work? Saving centers is a little hard, isn't it? All right, we're going to ask each one to speak. We have another microphone down there. If you could grab that. And people know me, I hate to give up my microphone. I go to bed, I have a pillow, it's just part of my life. And we can start down that line, and you get 3 minutes. Now, I've been told that holding a minister to 3 minutes is another miracle.
Amen to that.
But you get 3 minutes to tell us what you do, why you do it, and what your ideas are. So we'll begin with you, sir.
Sure. My name is John Wilsey. I work with an organization, a faith-based organization called Teen Challenge. Amen. Teen Challenge is a faith-based drug and alcohol rehabilitation program. It's long-term. I'm a true believer in long-term rehabilitation because 30-day programs, you just get your head clear. You know what I mean? And then they're back out on the street or whatever, and they haven't dealt with any issues. And Teen Challenge, being a faith-based, we attack the issues biblically. I always tell the guys when they come in the program, it's not about the drugs or the alcohol anymore. It's about the issues, the lying, the stealing, the lust, the pride, the anger, the resentments, the oppression, the depression, the criminal activity, all the junk that's in us. That's what God wants to pull out of us. And I believe that's what needs to be pulled out of an addict to become a productive member of society. Being faith-based, we don't get any monies from the government. We love the government. Praise the Lord for the government. And I heard from the governor today, he's all for faith-based programs. So I think we all know here the answer is that, you know. There's a quote from David Wilkerson, the founder of Teen Challenge. He says that, you know, certainly we can't claim a magical cure for addiction, a cure for the powder, the alcohol, the stuff that's in the needles. We can't claim a magical cure, but what we can claim is that we found a power greater, amen? That when we receive that power, it liberates us. It sets us free from the addictions, and that's what our faith-based program is about. And I'm blessed and honored to be part of this panel and to be part of the faith-based programs in the state of Maine, because we know it's not getting any better. I want to say probably 50% of the calls that I get, I do the admissions there, and I ask them, what are you addicted to? And the response I get now is Suboxone or methadone. That's their latest addiction. And it's supposed to be a drug that, you know, was put out there to help an addict, which it does, but as an addict, we found how to abuse it, and that's what's going on out there in the world, is they're abusing everything. I'm also in charge of the end addiction aspect of Teen Challenge, which we go into the schools. We go into the junior high. It used to be just high school, so we figured, well, junior high is a little too much for them, but it's not now, because we got to reach them at junior high level. And who knows if we're going to get into elementary schools to start really young, you know, to tell them about the dangers of the drugs and alcohol. So that's what we do at Teen Challenge. Thank you.
Economics is known as the dismal science, and what I'm going to talk about here to add to this panel why substance abuse treatment is so important is that it's now affecting our most vulnerable, and that's our babies in the state. In the last 4 years, infant mortality in the state has grown by over 20%. Went from being below the national average to above the national average, obviously coinciding with the growth in drug overdoses. And as George alluded to earlier, substance-exposed newborns in Maine now top 8.2%. That's over 1,000 babies being born every year affected substance-exposed. That's up 6-fold since 2005, so it's been just an explosive growth. But what's more troubling is in some counties, that number grows to over 16% of all babies being born. And if you have the study, if you look at the map, you see the counties in red, Waldo County being the highest at almost 17%, and then the yellow counties are the next ring below that. And there are all kind of costs of how much it takes to bring one of these babies back to baseline. But we've seen costs as high as $62,000 per baby. That's above the normal cost for just a delivery. Many of these babies, of course, are being born on the Medicaid system. So as taxpayers, this is a serious issue. Related to that, and another contributing cause to the infant mortality number, is the increase in sexually transmitted diseases that is coming along with the overdose crisis. We heard about the human trafficking, for example. Just recently, I read in New Hampshire that the number of syphilis cases has doubled within the last year. Keep in mind that syphilis as a disease was almost completely eradicated 2 decades ago. Now it's making a comeback. And gonorrhea is now on the red list by the CDC as a drug-resistant disease. So one of the contributing factors is that a mother obviously can pass an STD onto their child. That becomes another risk factor in the pregnancy. So this is a very serious issue that is striking at our most vulnerable.
Dude, you got information. It's overwhelming. I thank the Lord for you. Sort of a Mr. Spock on the Enterprise here. Chief Science Officer, thank you. And this report is amazing. I was grateful for the email. I feel like I need to call you Uncle George.
That's okay.
But honestly.
That's probably the best thing you've called me today.
You've been around all my life, Uncle George. I am grateful for the chance to speak as part of this event. At the same time, I'll tell you, I'm nervous. I don't know anyone who has the good capacity to offend people in 3 minutes as I do. Your opening statement, I appreciate you being here and moderating. It's such an honor, again, to be around you. But your opening statement that there's no solution breaks my heart for you. The solution happens to be repentance and return to God nationally. It is, what we're dealing with is symptomatic of the fact that we, as a culture, have abandoned God. And this is the fruit of all of that. If I may, one other thing, please don't anybody take offense. And I am so grateful for Carol and everybody. But the term faith-based irritates me every time I hear it. It's like, what are we, so generic, so general? What are you, like a Christian or Buddhist or Muslim? What's your deal? You're Christian, aren't you, brother? And I'm assuming the same of you. Nathan, you're a follower of Christ? It is, but we got to do this little song and dance that we're faith-based. And I find that I'm 3 decades into, actually now beginning my 4th decade into the ministry of people with life-controlling problems and addictions, and which, by the way, began with Teen Challenge. My training at Teen Challenge, and 4 years as a Teen Challenge staff member, as a young man leaving here. But we got to do this little song and dance that we're faith-based. Rather than identifying ourselves as what we are, we happen to be Christians. We happen to follow Jesus Christ and happen to believe that there is only one solution. Even as the scriptures say, there is one God. There is one God and one mediator between God and man, the man, Jesus Christ, 1 Timothy 2:5. And the Son of God was asked, why are you feasting with those people? And his answer was simple. Shouldn't the physician be among the sick? And are we not? We are the sick. And there is only one physician that can fix what's wrong with all of us. We recognize that these addictions are, despite the fact that everybody wants to play a game and talk about it being a disease. They understand it to be a disease. Well, it's a disease that we caught in Eden. It is a disease that we caught from Adam, and it's passed down to every one of us. It's sin. And there's only one solution for sin, and that's a Savior. And that Savior, there's only one Savior, and that is Jesus Christ. So I don't sit here as somebody who runs a faith-based program. I'm a Christian. I'm a pastor, a servant of Jesus Christ, and our program does nothing. The program by itself does nothing. Our church does nothing. Jesus Christ does everything. And he has a success rate that no other attempt has. The very best federally funded programs can't even come up with a whole 1% at the same time, by the same standards that they study the faith-based programs. They always say it in sort of a patronizing way. We have a success rate anywhere from 60 to 80% of those who actually complete the programs. And our standards happen to be higher than the government standards, because we consider somebody completely free if he's not even smoking. So I'm grateful for the opportunity, but I just honestly believe that the little song and dance about being faith-based is in vain. I don't know, at least in our community, any Buddhist programs. I don't know any Muslim programs. I don't know anybody who's offering any solutions through any other God except through Jesus Christ. He happens to be the only one who can save. He can save us not only from the consequence, which is hell, of sin, he can save us from the power of sin. And one last thing, I grew up here in a broken home. I'm as local as they come. I'm George Hale in the morning, WABI, all the way back to childhood. And baptized in this baptismal at the age of 8, when this building was brand new. And right here, heard and was taught, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. And that message affected the fatherless kid whose family was destroyed by chemical addiction and abuse. One more thing, if I may, without going over my time. The chemical abuse that destroyed my family was alcohol. My father died a very young man. Age of 34, he left this world and his family, not without first advising me not to follow his path. In 1870, the addiction problem in the state of Maine was demon rum. Do you know the state of Maine began prohibition? It all began right here. We started prohibition. Our godly governor, Joshua Chamberlain, in his very final inaugural address, addressed the issue. He was not a fan of prohibition. He didn't really support it, knew he had to enforce it, it had become the law. But listen to what Joshua Chamberlain said, Governor Chamberlain. He said at the close of his statements on demon rum, he said, there are other things to be thought of besides restraining men from the use of intoxicating drinks. Though this be the parent of crime, it begets monsters from which the good avert their faces and seek to save their fellows. Yet we must not expect that it can be wholly subdued and driven from among men. The laws against intoxicating liquors are as well executed and obeyed as the laws against profanity, theft, unchastity, or murder. Even if they are executed, they will not avail to extinguish crime nor banish evil from the hearts of wicked men. We must consider, our governor said, we must consider what can be done. Restrain and intimidate as much as you can by law. It is only by the gospel, still, that men can be converted from evil. There's a governor who didn't talk about faith-based anything, but he used the term gospel. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nate with Liberty Bay Recovery. Carol, thank you for setting this all up and inviting me. And Scott and Wendy for putting together this. I love your beautiful display out there. I can't get over it, but great work. I love listening to you, and the numbers don't lie, and so I appreciate that. Thanks for the church having us on here. I always love to begin. I feel like you're at an Academy Awards. You want to just start thanking everyone that helped set it up. But I do want to thank you guys for staying that actually did stay, because when the governor got done, I saw about 20 cars head out. So you guys understood we saved the best for last, and so thank you for that. Thank you for my fellow panelists here. And Liberty Bay Recovery, we're a state licensed, Joint Commission accredited 90-day residential style treatment program that offers a 6-month aftercare program. So what that means is adult men and women 18 to 65 years old who are dealing with substance abuse issues can come to us. We take private insurance, we cash pay. We gave out $400,000 in scholarship money from the start of Liberty Bay in 2015 until now. So we are very charitable. And we've helped 199 people as of today enter the doors into recovery, find their own conception of a higher power, get honest, get truthful, and change. Because what I really heard tonight from everyone is, what's the answer? Or, what's the cause of the problem? And for us, I really liked what you said about faith-based. We aren't necessarily faith-based, but we take people to 12-step meetings every night. A big thing about what we do there, if you look at the 12 steps, it says in the first 3 steps, God, and then it's all about writing your sins out, and it's all about confessing them in a 5th step, and then it's about making amends to people you've harmed, and then carrying that message to the next alcoholic. I can truly think of one person who's been on this earth who did that and who helped people do that, and that's Jesus Christ. So I do believe that what we do is help people find their path to recovery and to faith. While individuals are with us, they get intense treatment. We want to get to the truth. I think of the disease of addiction as cancer. If you went to a cancer clinic, they wouldn't drop, serum on you. They would aggressively attack the disease that is killing you. And so that's what we do. We use medication to help people detox, but after day 7, it's abstinence-based. So the only thing we might have is like a trazodone for a sleep aid or a depression medication, but there's no Suboxone. It's not a methadone clinic. We do believe living life, having a spiritual problem does not mean a chemical solution. It really does take change from the inside. It is a broken home. It is fear of being good enough. It is being untruthful. So we have to uncover that, and we have to blast through a lot of garbage to get to it with people because they have hidden it for years. People don't walk 5 miles into the woods and turn around one day and they're just out of the woods. It takes 5 miles to get out. So as much as arresting people and doing all this stuff, we hold them for 90 days because they need 90 days of supervision. They're adult children who don't know how to live. They don't know how to do chores. They don't know how to pay bills. They don't know how to treat themselves. So for 90 days, we give them that. We supervise them, we transport them, we house them, 6 hours a day of group, doctor's appointments, gym membership, yoga. We do everything. We give our hearts to help them. We have a very, very high success rate, and it's allowed us to actually move into a new facility where we're going to be offering 19 detox beds for men and women come October 1st, along with our 38 other beds that we have. So I'm very blessed to be here. I'm honored to be here. I'm the founder of Liberty Bay, and it was built on the fact that Maine didn't have treatment. I visited here in 2014 when my son was 8 months bored, and we married, obviously, and I came out here and I saw that there was no treatment. And I told my wife, I said, that's where we're going. That's where we're going. There's nothing in Portland. It's a city of 100,000 and there's no treatment. And so I came in and we flourished, supply and demand, just as the addicts and the drug dealers are doing to this society, we can do as a community when we think of treatment. So thank you for letting me be here, and that's it.
Well, we thank you for your attendance. I felt pretty young until Ken got going. At least you'll be happy to know I'm a teetotaler. I don't drink. So you don't have to work on that. It's obvious that we have an audience here that is in tune with your message, Ken. But how do you reach those who are not here? It's like, I hate to use the expression, preaching to the choir. You couldn't lose with that message. It's a good message. It's the message. But how do you reach those that are unchurched, those that the family structure is broken down? Because it's not only the addict, it's the family, it's the people around them, it's the extended family. How do they get the message when our church attendance in Maine is like 28%? I mean, I'm sure you're full on Sundays. I'm sure you have, I know you do have a vibrant church, as is this one. But now let's reach those that haven't been reached. How do we do that?
Well, I'll tell you, we don't reach them with a faith-based message. We reach them with a message of Jesus Christ. We don't pull any punches. We don't compromise. We don't soft sell. We don't rewrite the truth. We just lay out the truth. But I really do believe that the reason why churches have in fact failed and we have become so unchurched in this region is because, number one, the church has failed to deliver the Word of God. That so many of our churches in New England, particularly here in the state of Maine, have become, well, what we call liberal in their theology. And consequently, they're all dead. Saturday night bean suppers continue to pay the bills because there's no life there, and there's no life there because the Word of God is no longer preached. If it's no longer believed, once we abandon the creed, soon after we abandon the code of moral conduct, and it's just a downward spiral. On top of that, churches, even those that do minister the Word of God, forget the fact that it is the men that we must focus on. There's a disproportionate number, not just here in Maine, but all over the country, of churches that are dominated by women. And there are reasons for that. In fact, one author a few years ago wrote Why Men Hate Going to Church. And he laid out some science, laid out some statistical realities about men, not relating to what church has become and what church has done. I think there are things that we can do to fix that. But I think the primary issue is if we can present Jesus Christ as he is, not some artist's conception, not some painted, bearded lady, honestly, and that's it probably offends somebody, but that's a gift of mine. But the true Christ, the Son of the living God, the one who would enter the Lion of Judah, Lamb of God, one who would come and upset everything. I think a presentation of Jesus Christ as he is revealed in the scriptures wins people, wins hearts. And I really do think we got to focus on the man. We got to go after the man. If you can affect the man, you can affect the entire family. I realize that's incredibly sexist, right? Incredibly sexist. But if you can affect the man, if you can reach the man and get them to understand their duty before God, you can affect the entire family. And so that has been at least our focus at Calvary. Sorry, talked too long.
No, when you talk too long, I usually hit you, but I didn't even come close. But I don't want to. You were John, the Teen Challenge Maine, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How do you reach teens? I mean, they're busy with their iPads and their fast phones and their texting, whatever they do. I'm a little afraid to ask sometime. I know that when I can't do it, I ask my 8-year-old granddaughter. She comes in and says, "Oh, here's how we do that." I mean, how do you reach this generation? I know Ken is impassioned in how he wants to do. How do you reach them?
Well, first of all, Teen Challenge, we're an adult center. I know the name kind of throws people off sometimes. It started out back when David Wilkins started, was reached towards teenagers, but as the epidemic grew, we happen to be a men's center in Maine. We do have adolescent centers around the country. We have an adolescent girls' home in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. I mean, how to reach people, we got to go to them. You got to go to them. I mean, I'm all for going to church on a Sunday, praise the Lord for that, but where are the addicts at? They're not coming to church. We need to go out there and get them. We need to go into the jail, the prisons, and reach them. Because they're not coming to us. We got to go to them. And that's what the church was established to do. That's what Jesus Christ came to do, was disciple people. And that's what Teen Challenge is. Not faith-based. I get what you're saying. Trust me. Teen Challenge is a discipleship ministry. So Teen Challenge raises up men and women to go back out into the streets and reach these people. Because you have a living proof of it. I mean, for me, I ended up in jail in 1997, addicted to crack cocaine for 20 years, had nothing, any religion, nothing in my background. And there I went to a church service after some things have happened in jail. My brother had committed suicide, and my mom died, and I was ready to die. So a couple people took me to a service in the jail, and there was this guy that came out very blunt with us men in the jail. Because I believe what Ken's saying, we got to reach the men. I definitely believe that. And he was from the same town I was from, and I've never seen an addict change before. Where I come from in Brockton, Mass. You were an addict, you died an addict, you contracted HIV in the 80s where I grew up, you went to jail, you might have went to AA or NA for a while, but then I always seen that person back out on the street. So here I was in this service in the jail, and this guy is telling me that he was an addict. He had killed a Brockton police officer with his vehicle. He was addicted to drugs, and now he was the chaplain of the jail. Now that kind of really messed me up because he's from the same town that I was. And like I said, I'd never seen anybody change their life before, but there he was telling me now that he was the chaplain of the jail. I remember standing up and calling him a liar. I said, "Sir, how are you going to sit there and tell me that? You're from the same town I'm from. You did the same drugs I did. And now you're a priest." I didn't know what the difference back then was, minister and all that. And I called him a priest. And he said, "Young man, stand up." He said, "God changed my life, but he wants to change your life too." You see, what has to happen, it has to be a hunger that stirs up in you. And I saw the evidence in front of you of this guy there who's saying he's not an addict anymore, and I wanted what he had. So I also believe too that there's a level of participation of each addict as well that has to have a level of desire to change their life. You agree with that? Because if you don't have the desire to change, you're not going to change. So I'm a true believer that we need to go out there as Bible-believing brothers and sisters, followers of the gospel. We need to be the evidence that they see. Amen? Not that they hear or go to a doctor and hear from, but we need to see the evidence. And we are the evidence. We are the church, so we need to go out there and reach them in the jail, in the shelters, in the streets. That's how we reach them.
Thank you. You from Brockton?
I am.
Yeah, well.
Don't hold that against me.
No. Rocky Marciano came from Brockton.
Yes, he did. Marvin Hagler, too.
Yeah. It's a tough town. I'm not going to your town.
It is.
I could just see the way you were working. No, I'm staying out of Brockton. The problem we've had is some of those Brockton people have been coming up here, and that's why I'm going to go to Scott.
Well, let me tell you this. I went through Teen Challenge in Brockton, Mass., and we used to come up here to Maine before there was a Teen Challenge, and I used to say, what goes on in Maine is nothing but woods around here. But no, I don't say that jokingly, but I quickly found out how bad the epidemic is. And this was 10, 15 years ago, you know, and now it's even worse. So it's everywhere. It's not just in the city, it's not just in the ghettos or you know what I mean? It's soccer moms that are ODing, that are getting shot with Narcan. Young kids. And the answer is Jesus Christ. We know that. But I just think our government doesn't want to acknowledge that. For, you know, some do, some don't. I'm not a politician, but I do know what the answer is.
All right, thank you. Scott, you're the fellow with the research. I think your wife has a considerable amount of influence, but she's not on the panel tonight. So you can take all the credit. The Family Prosperity Initiative, you do the research. You hear the gentleman here. What is the bottom line that we're looking for? I know that I said earlier, we're not going to come up with one single approach. We're trying to identify a problem. There'll be other meetings. But where are we going? What is your research telling us?
To get to the bottom line of this drug crisis, you have to look more broadly. In the Family Prosperity Index, you'll notice that drug overdoses is actually coupled with the suicide rate. And the reason for that is, when you think about it, they're really just a continuum of each other. Today, really, the drug abuse crisis is just a new face of suicide. If you look at Maine suicide rate, it's been elevated above the national average since 2000. A new study came out from the federal government that showed that young adults between the ages of 18 and 25 have elevated thoughts of suicide in Maine. We're in the second quintile. If you divide all the states by 5, we're in the second highest ranking for suicidal thoughts among our young adults. I think this is getting at why religion is so effective. What we're dealing with is fundamentally an epidemic of hopelessness. And in fact, two economists, Angus Deaton, I'm partial to economists, I'm sorry, recently came out and found that what they're calling deaths of despair are rising, especially among white males, middle-aged males. The death rate is rising, whereas in other countries it's still falling. Again, and they're finding these in areas like Maine, being predominantly white and older than the rest of the nation. And when you think about it, their hypothesis is the American dream is dying for these folks. Think about in Maine, for example, if you grew up 20 years ago in Millinocket or Rumford, and people were telling you about the American dream 20 years ago, yeah, you believed it, right? They were literally printing money in those towns. Today, 20 years, they're economically devastated. And so I think that's a pretty good working hypothesis. And so when we put those two together, we didn't realize, I think at the time, actually, how intertwined they were. And that's been kind of eye-opening for me. And that's why the breakdown of the family is a contributor to that hopelessness. The lack of the belief in a higher order contributes to that hopelessness. And so putting Humpty Dumpty back together again is going to be as big of a challenge.
Thank you very much. Well, Nathan, I come to you. Program Director of Liberty Bay Recovery. I've got to go back on your history a little bit. I know a little bit about Arizona. My daughter lives in Apache Junction. Do you know where that is?
Are you proud of that?
Huh? Yeah, it's a great place. But I'm not there right now because the temperature is 112. Yes. But I will go back. You're about 17 years old. Mm-hmm. You're messing up a little alcohol.
Yep.
Some drugs.
Yep.
You were the epitome of sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Minus the sex.
Sex, well, I'll take that out. I really don't know.
We're just being honest. We're in the house here.
But that's an old saying in my business, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But you got drug felonies.
Okay. Yep.
Your life is a mess, right?
Getting there.
Getting there.
It's pretty bad.
Not things aren't going good.
That's right.
I'm thinking, sitting here reading your life story, proud that you're sitting here, but I'm saying, somebody who raised 9 kids, not all of my own. I've had 4 of my own and 5 of someone else's. But God, your parents have got to be. I'm thinking, what am I saying if you're my kid? How do you turn this around? What happened to that kid? Now I look and sit next to you, and I'm saying, what a great human being. What was the turnaround?
Action. You know, I think so far everyone tonight's talked about faith-based, and I think anyone that's committed to something will be successful. Whether it's Christianity, a sports team, recovery, math. If you're committed and if you put in the effort, you will be successful. A lot of people, it's the touchstone on everything. God is love, and love is action. So I know for me personally, my dad smoked pot. My mom, I've done cocaine and drink with her. So the minute I got sober, I already surpassed their greatest dreams as far as achievements in life. So the fact that I got 7 felonies erased, the fact that I own a home today that I rent back in Arizona, I got married on MDI 5 years ago. We have a son. I have a college degree, and I'm sober. So all of those cool other events are great, but the keystone is sobriety. It's waking up every day, staying committed to your higher power, staying committed to your message, and trying to help someone else along the way. So I think they say to me, yeah, fantastic, we're proud of you, but it's an inside job. Somebody said it earlier. You know, we can't find it out there. It's inside. And when you clear away the drama and the fear and all the stuff that you do working your recovery, you will find that truth. And if you stay committed to that truth, whatever it is, you will be successful. 100% of people that are committed to their truth are successful. 0% of those people that don't stay committed every day will not be successful. So I know for me, as I know for everyone sitting in this crowd, you are here tonight because you trust the people sitting in this room, and you trust that we will give you something that you can believe in, you know? And I trust that I'm here tonight to carry the message that the work at Liberty Bay we're doing is very powerful. And I just thank God that we're given the opportunity to be here. Leslie, my admissions coordinator, and myself to be here tonight. Invite you down any point to come visit and see what we do.
Thank you very much. You're a good guy. Arizona's not bad.
It's a great state. Come visit. I'll rent out my place to you if you want to check it out.
I've climbed the Superstition Mountains. You like that?
Did you bring some
At
water?
my age, I climbed it. I also had to have surgery on the knee. But anybody out there with questions so far, or I guess, we have the young lady who's going to just raise your hand before I, thank you. And would you come toward the aisle, and you're going to address a specific person if you wish.
I just want to say, I think that one of the problems with our country is we're too afraid to offend people. We're too politically correct. I lived in Brooklyn, New York for 8 years. Every Jewish holiday is a national school holiday. There's separation for church and state for some religions, but us as Christians need to really take a stand, come together, and our God is out of our schools. Moment of silence is gone, but the Muslim children are able to wash their feet and prepare themselves for prayer in our public schools. There is something wrong with our country. We need to come together. Enough is enough. It's time to stop being politically correct, not be afraid of who we're going to offend. Our country was based and founded by God and God beliefs in Jesus Christ. George Washington crossed the Delaware with God on his side. That was a miracle, that crossing. Our whole foundation is Christ-based. We need to get back to our roots, where we came from. We need to get back there. We're going to be sorry if we don't. Our children need us.
Did you have a question, sir?
May I respond to that before you go to that question?
Huh?
May I respond to that first,
You may.
Uncle George? This that is well stated. One of the realities that Maine and American Christians don't want to deal with is think about this number, for example, 80 million self-identified evangelicals in America. Only 25% of them vote in a presidential election. Only 25, and of that 25% that vote, there's no indication that they know a whole lot of Bible when they vote. And then when it's a non-presidential year, it drops to 16%. So, we can complain a lot, and certainly I do, about the state of affairs, but we are largely responsible for them by our abandoning the field and refusing to stand up and speak and vote.
Someone else raised their hand. Yes, sir. And there's one over here, one over there. The gentleman who's up.
Hi. Just a question on, I think in some ways it's a little unfair to be asking, I respect the work of our law enforcement agencies and our government trying to deal with these things. And the biblical purpose of government was to punish the evildoers and to protect the welfare, not the welfare and money, food stamps. I'm talking about our security as a nation, our national borders. We're trying to ask government to fix a heart problem, and that is where it comes to the gospel of Jesus Christ reaching in. I would also ask, though, what is the effect when we are teaching children from a very early age that you evolve from pond scum, that you are the parents or children of apes, and that there is no purpose in life? This is something that the schools could back out of, or at least offer an alternative of showing biblical creation and that you have a purpose and a value of life. And also, just as a father of a number of children, married, there's so much, I think, that the church has, and I love the body of Christ, but we have failed to train our children according to the Bible and to use the Bible, the book of Proverbs in particular, as a roadmap on how to raise our children. And now, instead of the 2-year-old yelling no to me, it's the 16-year-old or the 18-year-old yelling no to the sheriff or to the state trooper. And if they're not told no and taught no young, how are we going to get them to follow the rules and laws from somebody they don't even know?
Why, thank you, ma'am. Right here. Kind of making you run from one side to the other.
I wanted to ask you guys, kind of comes from a personal situation regarding someone I know, but considering your experience, if someone has roughly 10 plus years of addiction that's been pretty much unchecked with just a few run-ins with the law, and they're trying to change, how do you feel the stats are, the chances of an outpatient weekly drug and alcohol counseling therapy would be for them?
Okay. Did you catch it all?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. 10 plus years, low. 10 plus years of using a deadly drug on probably a daily basis and not dying already, low. You need to be locked up for a little bit. To rely on their own self-will to get them to an outpatient every day, to drive in a car. If they're having a bad day, they're going to say, F it. I'm just going to go get high. So to be locked somewhere, not locked, but to be somewhere for a considerable amount of time away from all of that is very important. And anything over 2 years, to be quite honest with you, is far too much. That's 2 years of life not lived. So why not mess with it? Just go for it, attack it.
Let me add, if I may. I have this conversation with a lot of men, about coming into our program at Calvary Residential Discipleship, and every man wants to make the case that he can do it that way. Every addict wants to say, I'll just go to a meeting, or I'll just, I'll attend church. But ultimately, it comes down to, can you prove that? And in a very short amount of time, they prove otherwise. And say, okay, it's apparent that you're trying to walk on broken limbs. And that's not going to change unless you put them in full traction. And I really believe that residential discipleship is that sort of full traction. That you're going to live in the company of other people that are going to run your life for a little while. And I have no problem telling those men coming in, we're going to tell you when to get up. We're going to tell you when to go to bed and everything else to do in between for 6 months of your life. And it is absolute last resort for most people. They want to come up with all kinds of creative alternatives. But ultimately, just say, well, all right, well, let me know how that works out. And then, weeks later, oh, we're still where we were. And many a couple have come into my office and I have said, okay, I know you believe what you're saying. Okay, go do that for a couple of weeks. And we're going to talk again if you're still alive. And we talk again, and I go, so that didn't work, did it? It's not working, not going to work, nothing's going to change. So admit that you need a full body cast. And I really do believe that's what our residential discipleship whole thing is.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Carl Golovin. If I could just share with you a success story, really, of the gospel being lifted up before Washington, D.C., and really the world. There are two newspapers in Washington, D.C., the Washington Post, the Washington Times. And for about the last 2 years now, the Washington Times has agreed to, in its pages each day, to print as much as will fit of a chapter each day of the New Testament. Yeah. William Tyndale's translation of 1534. And the domain reference I'll give you is tyndaletoday.com, Tyndale today.com. And the way it's worked, the New Testament, there are 260 chapters. The Washington Times publishes 52 weeks of a year, 5 days a week, 260 editions. So every chapter, as much as will fit each day, is right there with the news of shining the light amongst the news of the day. And if there are daily newspapers in Maine that would like to use those PDFs, they're available. So, thank you.
Well, when we began tonight, we said we were not going to end up with a magic bullet. We were going to try to identify problems. And I believe this is probably just the first of forums that will be held. I dealt in the prelim to this with Scott's better half. She didn't get up. I'm glad because I'm not sure I could pronounce her name right. Dr. Wendy Warshalich. How did I do? Okay. She's an economist with the Family Prosperity Institute. We wanted to try to bring people in who see it on a day-to-day basis. Peter Arno, Dave Bushy, let's see, Sean Hashey was here, and the sheriff, Troy Morton, very generously giving up their time. They have long days. And our panel tonight is Mr. Sermel. Give me 5. Sermel. Ken Graves. Made me feel quite old. Scott Moody and John Wilsey. These are gentlemen who are on the firing line, who do their daily job. I'm not sure what message we send out to you. I know obviously you gave up a night to come here, so you care about people, you care about each other. Take the message out as far as you can. In my business, generally I'm bringing good news some days and a lot of bad news some days, but that's the way it's been for this last 50 years. I'm not going any further back than that. And the lady spoke from New York. I wonder if she wondered if I grew up in Staten Island, so do you know where that is?
My daughter went to college there.
Wagner? So did I.
I'm from Maine. I just lived there for a brief period of time.
Well, we were fine on Staten Island until they built the bridge and let everybody from Brooklyn in. But we thank you all. We appreciate you giving up your night. I thank all the participants. I appreciate and was honored to be a part of it. Thank you very much, and be careful.